and I was feeling grateful for her, for her favor. And then I wrote it down on an email to her. I expressed my gratitude, and then she called me back, and she was really furious. She said that this is something which should not come on email, because these emails are scrutinized by the university, so this could endanger her career. So that actually gave me a shock, and I thought, even if I have a best of the intention, I can make a blunder. So I that it really humbled me, actually, that I'm not in control. Actually, I'm dependent on the supreme power just to do anything right. I just can't be sure, even with my best of intentions, that if I'm doing the right thing or not. So that really helped me.
And that's relatable. And it stuck with you, apparently. Thanks, Kautik. So let's go to the next slide. I promised abundant metaphor and analogy. We're going to a garden, series of garden analogies. One of the ways that the premier teacher of Bhakti, which is a system of yoga, gave his teachings was through garden analogies. Talked about how our lives are very much like growth of a plant spiritually. And so one of the aspects of gardening, or ecology in general, I was just in a forest and I noticed that those trees that had felled or been felled by the wind or other influences then gave way to fodder for many other plants to live off their remains. And that goes to this process of receptivity or element or principle of receptivity, that we can remember how waste, seeming waste, transforms into new life. And that in the next slide, we talk about how all aspects of our lives have similar cycle. And if we're aware at every point that whatever position we're starting from is a valid position. And one of the main points made in the wisdom literatures is that one can start from any position to grow spiritually. In fact, sometimes when one is especially disappointed with the way life is, that may be an ideal impetus to grow. And another aspect is that one can always grow. This is pointed out by one of the great teachers of Bhakti named Bhakti Vinod. From the turn of the century, he talked about how every living being can evolve in due course of time. Or he said, not evolve, but he said rise. And one can rise in due course of time. Have you ever been in a situation where you were affected by the lower modalities, perhaps by tamas? Darkness, tamas can instill a sense of hopelessness or a sense of depression that I can't do anything right. I can't rise. Whatever I do goes wrong. I hope I'm resonating with somebody because I'm resonating with myself. At various times of the day, week, month, or lifetime, the mind can be affected by that modality. I find it especially encouraging, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's proclamation, every living being can rise in due course of time. And as we spoke about last week, only two things necessary: knowledge and practice. Once you have knowledge of your position, we talked about sambandha, then you can take up abhideya, or the practice that incrementally brings you to higher consciousness. So we're constantly cycling, and when it's time to let go, compost, this means next. And it's often that it's very difficult to give up something in this world, or put in another way, change can seem scary. But if we remember the cycle of life and that there are things to let go of at certain times, I can give a personal anecdote. My wife and I are in a process of decluttering. We had a retreat about a month and a half ago, and we talked a lot about getting down to the bare necessities and not leaving things around that we don't need. And just going through things, I just notice how hard it is to take them out. You might pile them up and start to, get ready to take them out. It's like, oh yeah, but what about that? In fact, in my room here, I have a chair that I inherited from my father. I don't really need it because I don't fit in it, but he used to sit in it all the time. So I always thought of my father when I saw it. But somehow or other, it's been sitting here for a couple of weeks now. But I just thought, oh, the chair. There's so many things that we have in our lives, but we can know that when we are willing to let them go at the right time and realize when the right time is, that frees up a lot of energy. And it also, if we compost the things that now seem useless by letting them go, that includes events that have happened in our lives that seem to have been detrimental. For instance, have you ever loaned somebody money and then, due to the law of diminishing intent, I learned that in accounting. There's a law called the law of diminishing intent. You loan somebody money, and as the longer the time goes by that you don't collect it, the more they forget about paying it back or think it's not important. So there are incidents in our lives that may pile up, but we can let them go, put them in compost, and take them as valuable lessons, like fertilizer for new seeds and new growth. And part of this is something that Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, and that is not becoming overly attached to all the things in our lives. I've given this example before, and it's consistent with the garden analogies that I'm going through today, because it's about a flower called the lotus flower, which is called Padmaja, means it's born out of mud. Padma means mud, and Ja means to be born. So Padmaja is the flower called the lotus, grows out of the bottom of the pond. It rests on the surface of the water of the pond, but the water never permeates. It never penetrates. It's impervious to water. And so Krishna says, when your intention is to use everything for a higher purpose, not to try to control it or own it, but notice that it's there for improving yourself, and how to use it. The purpose of all paraphernalia, all things, can become, Krishna says in the Gita, to use them in service. That intention itself in using things makes one impervious to the kind of clinginess that things have in our lives. And that can include, I'm making the case here, mistakes from the past or transgressions on the parts of other people that may have left an impression in our mind. If you think to times when somebody didn't pay you back or they mistreated you, or I mean, I can remember a time I was walking across an intersection in Burlingame, just going on a daily walk, and a group of young people, as they were making a left-hand turn, just for no reason at all, they just screamed at me. And it was just a joyride, I guess. But it was jarring, and it kind of left an impression. I was walking down the street, and every time I walk across that intersection, that same thought comes up. So the Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Sutras talk about how we have a stockpile of all these impressions, not just from this life, but from last lives as well. And if we categorize them as experience and lessons learned, they become fertilizer for new growth. So one of the points that Prabhupada makes in a purport is that disappointment or frustration, similar concepts, may become the doorway to enlightenment. It's like, how is frustration spiritually helpful? I'll let you all answer that for a second, or more than a second. Can go on all day. How is frustration? Here's the question. How is frustration the doorway to enlightenment? Your riddle for the day. Our operators are standing by to take your calls. We're open
Uh, I
24
felt
hours a day.
I actually heard so the impressions would be past lives. So I was just I just wanted to say that I felt that the impressions was I would be meditating on my experience of past lives and trying to taste the fruit, right? The blue japa, and that would be how would I look at an expression like as a vibration um impression, I mean impression, how like I
So
would
just,
try to
okay,
imagine. Yeah.
that for a second, Lee.
Yeah.
These are called samskars.
Subscars. Okay.
Samskar. Somebody write it in the text box. So a samskar means a recorded experience that's there within your subtle body. So the
Oh,
way the Gita and the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali Muni describes our mind, it's like a digital cloud in a sense.
okay.
And when we transmigrate from one body to the next, although we leave behind our gross physical body, the exoskeleton, the organs and so forth that are pumping blood and other functions, then we we move into a new body with the same subtle body we had in the last life. Therefore, there are stored impressions from multiple lifetimes there, and those are there within the subtle mind. Does anybody else have a frustration is the doorway to enlightenment riddle for anybody who would like to opine? Chuck, can you say more about frustration reveals? This is the theme of your thesis. Frustration reveals the limits of control. Can you hold forth on that?
Sure, I can try.
Okay.
So frustration comes about when reality doesn't meet our expectations, and it exposes the illusion that we can move around the deck chairs on the Titanic and rearrange the world to make ourselves comfortable and fulfill our desires. So it's the doorway because when we stop trying to force life to conform to our desires, then that can start to wake us up to a different way of looking at the world.
Thank you. That was graphic, thinking about organizing the deck chairs on the Titanic. And Radhakripa has his hand up.
Yeah, in my regular call to my family members, when I ask them in the morning how you guys are, and they say all good, you know. And then maybe after the call is over, I then individually being contacted, this happened, that happened. So I was just feeling so frustrated in that sense that when I asked in the beginning, I just wanted to be genuinely asking so that if there is something we can talk. But then I felt like this is how we are conditioned in a group dynamics. We don't want it to speak. We are so worried about how in a group dynamics things will happen. And then I felt like, what, souls are very, very, scared being their own positioning, how people perceive them rather than being truthful. And I'm really grateful that all the learnings which you share is helping me cope up with that one. Otherwise, I would have got really frustrated, why you can't speak the truth to me, when I'm calling you regularly, but I'm hearing from some other people, there's some serious things going on. So just thought to share
Wow,
that.
yeah, we can all relate to that, I'm sure. Thank you, Radhakripa. Frustration abounds in this world. Jonathan.
So I believe that I understand that when frustrations arise, we feel something that we don't want to feel. So we start to seek like a solution to that frustration. And that can lead us to a lot of things, but I think ultimately it leads us to realize, just to realize the truth. A
Yeah,
real
thanks,
solution to it.
Jonathan. That's a very wise statement. And we have the wherewithal to do that. It seems, yeah, I won't say more about it because I think I don't want to steal anybody else's ideas. But that was very helpful. Radhakripa and Jonathan and Premanishta.
I was just thinking that if I'm not frustrated, I just go in a complacent mode and I'm like happy with the way my life is going and I don't want to really change and improve. So unless I'm frustrated with with my current situation, I'm not going to look to improve my life. So that's why it is definitely, I think, a
An
doorway
impetus,
to.
right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We may search for for a reason for it or a solution for it. This is why it's an element of receptivity to be aware of frustration as a doorway. Do we have a couple in the chat box, Jam? Do you want to read those?
Sure. Bhakti Rasa said, when you allow yourself to step back and ask spiritually, what am I to learn from this? And also to be able to let go and let God. Interesting. And she also says, also understanding we don't always have control over everything. So the wisest thing is to let go. That's from Bhakti Rasa. And then from Vijay, just like instead of fighting against the current of a strong river, just go with the flow.
Thank you very much. So in the paragraph where Prabhupada's my teacher, where he describes the phenomena or the opportunity, I should say. A doorway, I mean, we can think about what a doorway is. You can walk through a door and you're in a different environment after passing through a gateway. If you've ever been in a crowded city, I've had this happen in cities, for instance, New Delhi. Went through a crowded neighborhood, came to the person's house, and then walked in, and suddenly it was very peaceful and clean and nice inside. And after walking through the door, I was in a different reality altogether. And so doorways are perspective shifters, or they're a metaphor for that also. And in frustration, in the context that my teacher brought this up, was when we become frustrated with our lives, or I should say with any given experience we have in our life, there's a reason for that. The reason is that we're incompatible with material nature because we're subtle and material nature's gross. And when we try to put it together and make it work, it's frustrating. And when we start noticing it's frustrating, that's when we can intuit that we're incompatible with the lower natures of this world altogether, including this body. If you've ever had a sense of frustration with your material body, for instance, how you look or how you feel or how your clothes fit or don't, or whatever it may be, it's never quite right. And even when it is, then imperfection is right around the corner because material nature doesn't hang together the way we wish it did. So one can ascertain from frustration a sense of the dichotomy we're experiencing between ourselves and the physical world. And that becomes fodder for growth, spiritual growth and reception, or receptivity, I should say. So that when we feel frustration, we can notice that I'm frustrated because I'm dealing with something foreign to my nature. That's the context in which he gave this statement about frustration.
Kurt, did you have anything to say?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, your mind reader. Um, yeah, just it's a interesting. I thought I'd heard that quote somewhere before, that frustration. And actually, on the LA River, there's a monument right along it on the bike path, and it said, if it is true what the Buddhists say, self-disgust is the first step toward enlightenment, then I am on the road again. It's part of the yeah, and it's just this poem. Can't even You can see it on the LA River. It's pretty cool.
Look at that.
Yeah, and yeah, no, so I think self-disgust is a more visceral emotion that I feel. Frustration is like, yeah, sure, there's basically degrees of feeling, and it's kind of like the way we talk to ourselves, and that really just says a lot about a person. So I don't know, just self-disgust was more extreme, and I feel I'm an extreme person, I guess. So frustration seems more timid almost, or it can. That's what I had to say, I guess.
Disgust, a feeling of revulsion or strong disapproval aroused by something unpleasant or offensive, cause someone to feel revulsion or profound disapproval. It comes from French to Italian to Latin, dis, expressing reversal, and gustos, taste. Doesn't taste right. Distaste for it all. Yeah, right on point, Kurt. It's amazing how humans are so perceptive over centuries and millennia. So much wisdom is out there, and so much of it is compiled into pithy statements that we can all resonate with thousands of years later, right? And you can put it on a river, and while people are walking on a bridge, rather, and when people are walking by, they say, "Oh, yeah, I relate to that." It's the same spiritual experience or observation that we have. There's a little bridge in a botanical garden where there's a placard on the bridge, and to discourage people from throwing coins in the pristine stream that's below, it said, "No coins needed to operate creek."
It's pretty funny. I'm gonna say that for later.
Yeah. Jonathan, what say you? Any thoughts on this?
I think that what you said, spiritual vision, that resonated with me because like there's some things that we all sort of agree on.
Yes, that's true. This is something that Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, that he says, Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmyam. The spiritual experience is something that is directly, again, repeat the word, experienced by the observer, and it's universal. All spiritual beings who engage in some spiritual practice may come to this direct experience for themselves. It's not theoretical. In other words, they see it for themselves. Hayden, you're into meditation and so forth. And I was just curious because you teach it and you practice it. It sounds like, what are your feelings about observation of the different energies, lower, higher, and so forth? And I also noticed you're taking a lot of notes, at least it seems so. That I'm just curious, any perspectives you could share with us from your practices and from your perspective?
Yeah, I think I I saw an interesting quote the other day in a newsletter I was reading about meditation, and the author said he had been meditating for 11 years every day and still he couldn't get his mind to stop. And I thought that was really insightful because it's not, I guess for me, I'm still learning to meditate. I haven't practiced for a long time, and I think coming in with expectations for what you're going to get out of a certain practice or yoga or going to therapy or something that's helping you with your perceptions of the world. I think it's more about just an understanding of it because you can't fundamentally change your experience of the world, I don't think. Well, I do like what's been said about this kind of self-disgust and noticing things that push you to grow. And I really like that idea.
Yeah, I like your phraseology there, things that push you to grow. The things that seem to be pushing against us oftentimes are the catalyst for real growth in our life. The other may be theoretical, but when we get down to it, that feeling of complete, utter disgust. I have this phrase that I had a friend named Dave Dibburn when I was in high school, even before high school, grew up in the same neighborhood. And he was a musician. And I remember one fine summer night, he lived one street over from us, and we could hear somebody bounding up our steps. And then he just opened the door, and he had shaved all his hair off, and which was taboo at that time. And then he had his flute in his hand, and he said, "That's it. No more messing around. I'm going to learn the flute." And then he slammed the door and ran back home. Just wanted to announce it. And he had a complete disgust with himself and the effort or lackluster effort he had put into it so far. And he just said, "That's it. This is it. No more. I'm not going to take this for myself anymore." Subhadra.
There used to be a song called Somebody's Putting the Squeeze on Me. And I had a friend that used to say that God was putting the squeeze on him.
Yeah. Yeah. And what comes out, that's the next thing when you get squeezed. And if you're the prepared mind to take that squeeze as a reminder of a higher purpose, then there's no dearth of pressure that we find ourselves in. We won't be disappointed by a lack of opportunities to grow if we have that perspective. Lee, what do you think?
Hare Krishna, thank you for sharing. I like the points that Subhadra brought up. Nothing to add on. I'm just reflecting. I'm still reflecting on it.
Yeah. It's helpful when you hear this and then you get squeezed, then you can remember it. Just like a while back, I started looking into composting. And the title of one of the books I read is Compost Everything. The author, very interesting person, said that, oh no, given enough time, anything will decompose, anything. Of course, organic things will go much quicker. You may have to wait around a few lifetimes for certain types of chemicals or metals and things like that to break down, but everything breaks down eventually. And it got me fascinated with the process of saving anything that is used in the cooking process and putting it in a specific place very purposefully. In fact, right outside my window here, I have my composting bins. And it's a ritual for me to take out the scraps or whatever's compostable and to put it in there. It just feels like a real treasure, because if you leave it in there long enough, was his method was, he said, well, if you're lazy and you don't want to go through all the trouble of turning it over on a regular basis, so if you just leave it long enough, the time factor will transform it into valuable material for your garden. And it's really true. Yeah. Well, here, let's move to slide number 8, because I should say some practical things. Not that these aren't practical, they're philosophical, but they can be used. So they lessons. Make a productive space to put your mistakes and faults, and then leave them alone to compost. So, of course, it's again the extended metaphor we're using, but literally, when we have setbacks, rather than turning them into a kind of dissonance in your mind, you can say, okay, this is what happened, and therefore I'll put it in a place for it to compost. Whatever mistake was there, rather than agonizing over it, let me put it in a productive space. For instance, if you make a mistake, let's say you were asked to give a speech and then you totally blow it, or you think you did. Generally, you don't totally blow anything, but it's below your expectation. Then that could become the impetus to improve the next time, or whatever it may be. But if you've already designated a place to put mistakes, faults, and so forth, and let them compost, then you feel a sort of order in your life. Now, this is parallel with one of the famous statements in another book of spiritual knowledge and bhakti called the Srimad Bhagavatam. It says if someone's able to train their minds so that whatever happens, whatever adversity comes, they place it in a very special place for composting. And they take it as a divine lesson to learn to become more humble, as one of you mentioned, or more determined. So many nutrients can come out of that composting pile of our mistakes and missteps, so that even what seems to be garbage becomes something rich and nourishing in our lives. And I like slide number 11. Let's move to that, which is a quote that I included that I appreciate. What slide number is that? I'm looking at number 10, 11. It says, I don't have to make it happen, it just will. You see that one? Yeah. I don't have to make it happen, it just will. Just noticing in any natural environment, things naturally evolve. Of course, in a forest, as I mentioned earlier, there's a natural cycle that things that are dying leave fodder for other things to happen. And some of the things that happen to us, you don't have to be extremely concerned, because if you go on and let them sit and compost, the lesson will arise, just like nutrients arise out of compost or garbage, or I should say scraps of organic matter that are left long enough. Trust that time and oxygen will do their work and that they will even feed the next cycle of growth. Some of these are right out of the composting book. Trust that time and oxygen will do their work, and that they will even feed the next cycle of growth. The ever-deepening descent into the unconscious suddenly becomes illumination from above. Carl Jung. And surprise, it is transformed into fertile soil or the deep wisdom just waiting for its turn and supporting new roots, new shoots in its reach for the sun. Don't be afraid to discard, let something go, even if it breaks your heart a little. And a few other mantras that come up here. What is the lesson? That's a question to ask constantly. It's a way that you can grab onto wisdom. Instead of feeling victimized, ask, what is the lesson? And the next is that the universe is a cosmic classroom. There are many metaphors for the world and for life, like some say it's a rat race or climbing something. But if you look at it as a cosmic classroom, you may feel held in a different way here. I already said the next one, but then to be a learner, not a victim. Problems are our friends. Sounds counterintuitive. But if you embrace that, the world becomes a place of learning. A review of frustration is the door to profound insight. And finally, failure is the pillar of success. So these are general principles. You'll hear them from any self-respecting, self-help personality, but they pervade the wisdom literatures as well. If you have a higher purpose in your life and you interact with the world in such a way that you're able to observe what happens to you carefully and then take it as a lesson, you can continue to improve. Okay, there was a couple of comments before we have to say goodbye.
The first one is from Nina. Hopefully someone notices being frustrated and being helped. And then Yasmin says, I really appreciate this lesson. Lord Krishna is teaching us to see suffering not as punishment, but a way to come closer. I like thinking of things as this is not happening to me, it is happening for me.
Fantastic. Anybody else want to say anything before we sign off? Do you want to make an emoji or wave or anything? Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Lee J. Thanks, JM. Thanks, Radhakripa.
Yasmin says, now let me go on my merry way to frustrate my husband.
Touche. Yeah, you can tell somebody who's feeling frustrated by you, no, I'm trying to help you out. Don't you know that frustration is a doorway to enlightenment? Anyways, really a pleasure to meet you, Hayden. Who else was new today? Rose, thank you for joining. Let's see.
David.
Hayden, I said, great to have you.
David.
Oh, David. Yeah, thank you. David, thank you. Sandeep, welcome. David, great to have you. Andrelli, thanks for being here. I love your name, Andrelli. And yeah, thanks to everybody. Well, there's a kind of a charming tradition I picked up from some yogis in the Himalayas who have this way of saying goodbye. They even use it to say hello. It's kind of like aloha, say hello and goodbye. And it's a phrase they say a lot. It's to encourage one another. It goes Hari Bol. Hari means the supreme who takes away all your obstacles, and Bol means just say it. And it also is kind of an indication. It's like an encouragement to keep your spiritual practice going. So they do this thing where they put their arms high in the air and they call out Hari Bol to one another when they're departing. And so I thought maybe we could try it. Anyway, I'm doing it. You can do it if you like. Haribo.
Haribo! Haribo!
Thanks,
Haribo!
everybody.
Thank you.
Hope to
Thank
see you.